covers the Philadelphia Eagles. A lot of Eagles news. Even when you think things are slowing down, they reel you back in. And why did it take so long for a Demarco Murray story to pop up this offseason, Jimmy?
Is it really one, though? I mean, the report, I guess, was that, he'd rather be somewhere else, and the Eagles would, I guess, essentially like to take a mulligan on that signing. I don't think either of those two things are really news, to be quite frank, really.
Well, yeah, and I agree, but at the time when they hired Peters, first reaction was, well, Murray doesn't remind me of Jamal Charles, Charchandrick West, or Spencer Ware, the three guys who played running back
right
out there. So I don't know why people thought that Murray might be a better fit in this system, nor does he remind me of Brian Westbrook or LaShawn McCoy, the two other West Coast backs that really played in this system.
Well, maybe he's just a better fit in any system that doesn't run him around the edge.
That would be a viable option. Right. Now, this doesn't seem like an offense that wants to go that way. He has said today that he talked to Peterson, which I guess is somewhat new news. We haven't heard Peterson's name at all, but he said that Peterson going to try to look at some of his Dallas stuff and maybe install some of that. But do you think Murray can still be a viable player, after what you saw from him last year?
The one good thing that you did get out of Demarco Murray last year is that he had 17 rushes on either third or fourth down, and on every single one of those 17 carries, he either got a first down or a touchdown. So he is absolutely still a very good short yardage back, but otherwise he didn't really give you all that much last year. but he was good. He was very good in those situations. So he's going to count for $8 million on the cap, I believe, in 2016. Do you want to pay that kind of money for a guy that's a short yardage back? No, obviously you don't. But it's not as if he's not going to be, one of the top 45 players on the team on game day. So, I mean, he can help for a year, and then after the year is over, when it makes more sense to cut him, then I'm sure they will at that time, barring some kind of, monstrous comeback season. But he's going to be on the team this year as far as every indication that we see from his situation. Just to go over his situation very briefly, he'll count for $8 million if they keep him. He'll count for $13 million on the cap if they cut him. That's completely off the table. And then he'll count for $4 million if they're able to trade him. So they'll actually save $4 million if they're able to trade him. But the problem is they're not going to be able to get anyone to take on his contract as is. So you can pretty much forget about the trade too, unless he's able to restructure somewhere. But again, I don't know why he would want to do that, seeing as he's making a lot of money on the current contract.
Yeah, he seems like a really immovable guy at this point, and cut him $13 million. They guarantee him $7 million for this year. So it seems like, Jimmy, the two must find a way to get along.
Yeah, and I don't think that there's any reason to think that they can't. I mean, I heard him on another radio station earlier today, and he seemed genuinely, optimistic about 2016, at least in comparison to what he went through, or at least how he played, rather, in 2015. So I don't see any reason why they can't, get it together and make him into a somewhat productive back. I mean, he's not going to be anything close to what he was in 2014, obviously, when he led the NFL in rushing by almost, 500 yards. And he's probably not going to be as bad as he was last year. If you can get him somewhere in between those two, maybe he can be a semi-productive back for 1 year before you can get rid of him.
Jimmy Kempski, PhillyVoice.com, with more on the Eagles. Jimmy, do you think that Doug Peterson maybe gave us a little clue on his thought process at the quarterback position when he talked to Derek Gunn the other day on Comcast?
Yeah, it's funny. That just got buried on their site somehow, and never really saw the light of day. But he was interviewed by Gunner. Gunner does a great job, and he mentioned the Gunner. I think the question that he was asked was, can they compete now? And he mentioned some positional groups that are strong, like he mentioned the defensive line, and he mentioned the linebackers and something else. And then he said, you fill a hole here, you fill a hole there, and then maybe you bring aboard a young quarterback possibly, and you take it from there. And then the video ended, and I was like, wait, what? No. We're hearing more about that young quarterback.
I thought the same thing.
So I don't know if he meant, we're going to be drafting a guy who's 13th overall, or if we're going to be grooming a guy behind a guy that's already in place, or we're going to get somebody later in the draft or whatever. I mean, there's any number of possibilities what he was talking about when he said that. But it does make sense for them to bring in some kind of young quarterback, especially in the draft. I think this is actually a very deep draft for quarterbacks. I mean, you don't have, like, the top two guys like you did a year ago with Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston, who were, clear, worthy of the first and second overall pick. I don't think there's a guy like that in this draft, but I do think there are a lot of quarterbacks going to get drafted this year. I think there were, 8 quarterbacks got drafted last year. You're going to see in the double digits this year and well into double digits. I think you'd see as many like 15 go in this draft. So there's going to be a lot of them. And there could be, maybe 3 or 4 that go in the first round and possibly 3 in that top 15. So, yeah, I think this is a deep quarterback draft, but not necessarily high on really elite prospects. So I can absolutely see them draft a guy and begin to groom him.
Jimmy Kempski of PhillyVoice.com. Jimmy, last year the Eagles made, they traded McCoy, they traded Foles. Do you anticipate?
Wait, what?
Do you think there are candidates on this year's team due to the coaching change and the scheme change on defense that would be candidates to be traded?
Well, if we're talking about a big name, one guy could be Connor Barwin. I don't know if that'd be the best idea or anything that they're really looking. They have information on that. Just, you just look at the contract that Vinny Curry got. Brandon Graham's already making a lot of money. I know that they do want to have a lot of quote-unquote fastballs, like Andy Reid used to say in the old Jim Johnson days, where, you load up on that defensive line talent and throw a rotation of them at opposing offensive lines. But Barwin, I think Barwin is a really athletic guy. I think he could move to Sam in a 4-3. I think he played defensive end in a 4-3. I think he does have that kind of versatility, or maybe use him some kind of hybrid role. I think he absolutely could do that. But I really do think that his best fit in the NFL is basically the position that he played the last 3 years, in that jack position as an outside linebacker in a 3-4 jack, short for jack of all trades. I think that's sort of his best role in the NFL. So, if a team came calling and, they're interested and put together something worthwhile for the Eagles for them to move on from Barwin, the Eagles could, maybe get something in return for him and maybe use a draft pick that they can use for the future, and they'd actually save about $6 million if they were to let him go. So he'd be one guy. And then, there's several others that, with varying degrees of what you can get in return for them, but that would be the biggest name guy that I could see where I could see where it makes a little bit of sense.
Yeah, and you wonder what the future for Kiko Alonso is, too. I mean, he's not a 4-3 kind of backer, even though when he was in Buffalo, I guess they were going to move him to the weak side, but he might not be a fit with Michael Kendricks here.
Yeah, it may not. When you look at what Jim Schwartz is as a defensive coordinator, he's going to bring that 4-3, and to be determined how much of that wide 9, he uses, and how many, sort of those kind of looks that he uses. And when you're in that kind of scheme, you prefer the linebackers to be a little bit bigger than what Alonso is behind it, because you're going to get blockers on you. You want to be able to shed those blocks and make tackles. And I don't know that that's really the strength of Kiko's game. Kiko is under contract for 1 more year, and then he actually becomes a restricted free agent that the Eagles can retain for a very small amount of money. So they actually kind of have him under control for the next 2 years. So, if there were a team that were to come calling and they were willing to give you, something for him, then I think they'd listen to it. But he doesn't really cost all that much money. So, he's not a guy that they're going to go out of their way to try to dump. But, if somebody came around and said, hey, we'll give you some kind of mid to late round pick, I'm sure they'd be listening.
Okay, Jimmy Kempski with more on the Eagles, of course, over at PhillyVoice.com. There's a lot of Eagles stuff, and he's got a lot of it covered. And, of course, here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, Jimmy.
You got it.